Hi, today it's day 7 of the Break the Stigma challenge, and today's question is, have you ever tried therapy? And as many of you know, I have, and I am currently seeing a therapist who is a counselor, I believe. I'm not really sure if she's a counselor or therapist or what the differences are, but she has an MA, so she doesn't have her PhD, but she focuses on giving skills and talk therapy as well as EMDR and trauma therapy. So she specializes in things like anxiety, eating disorders, trauma, and yeah. So that's my current therapy situation. I started seeing a psychologist when I was 16. That was a little bit of a different experience because it was focused on talk therapy, which for me wasn't the most helpful thing, because what I would do is I would just build up all the stuff as the week would go on, and then I would come into therapy and unload and then just go back and do it all over again. So I didn't really get better per se, because I was just kind of floating along doing those things, and also taking antidepressants and things like that. So it wasn't the best thing for me, but it works for other people. So and then in college, I have a very funny story about that experience, but essentially I was turned down for free counseling that the school offers. And then because I had more long-term issues, as they said. And so they referred me to the program that had master's students. Basically, you were going to be a case study for a master's student. So I enrolled in that. And she focused on CBT, which is cognitive behavioral therapy. It was helpful in some ways, but I was in a really bad place at that time. So I don't know if I was in the right headspace to actually do the homework to improve. So I did not improve during that time either. The most improvement that I've seen ever was kind of doing some other lifestyle changes and yeah, so I could go on a really long tangent, but I'll just stop there. If you have any questions, I'll put up a question in. Did I ask my therapist initial questions when I met them? And I actually didn't ask them a ton about themselves. I was kind of just basing it off of my gut feeling when I talked to them. And I really focused the conversation around, what do you think that our plan would be? And it was interesting because the first place that I went to was called Willis Counseling in Chicago. And this is this last year's round of finding a therapist. When I was younger, it was a totally different thing, and I didn't ask anybody any questions. I just kind of went with the first person who I found, and so this time around, I really wanted to make sure that it was the right person. And my big thing was, I wanted to make sure that they would be focusing on building skills as opposed to medicating me. So that was my first question for even on the phone call before setting up the appointment. The very first thing I said was, hey, I'm not really interested in being medicated. I've done that before, and that was kind of the first line of defense that my previous psychologist went to, and I want that to be my last line of defense if everything else doesn't work. Some things that were really important to me about my therapist was, though, I wanted to make sure that they weren't religiously affiliated, because I've heard horror stories. As most of you know, I'm agnostic, so I don't subscribe to any religion, and so I didn't want to. It was really important to me that I had a person who would not bring religion into the conversation at all, and that was another thing that I researched about them and checked on their religious affiliation, and yeah. The Willis Counseling was interesting. I didn't pick them because I kind of went in there and told my story and talked about how I wanted to build skills, and they came up with a 3-month plan, which felt like a professional improvement plan. So that felt weird to me, and I didn't feel any warmth from my therapist. And for me, it's important that I feel some kind of warmth and want to talk to them. Whereas the other person who came up with that 3-month plan, I didn't really feel any connection with her or any warmth. So, I really just based it off of how I felt and if I felt comfortable with the person. So I didn't have a ton of actual questions for my therapist, but, was really looking at the vibe and how I felt. And the next question is about CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy. And I gotta be honest, I don't know where to begin either on that one. CBT is different than talk therapy, which is, I think, what a lot of people think of when they think of therapy. or probably more accurately, it's different from psychoanalysis, and that talk therapy sort of way. Ugh. I don't know if I'm getting my terms right, so I apologize in advance. But my experience with CBT was, first I had to go in and do a bunch of questionnaires that took hours, and it was basically to narrow down if I had any other things going on in my life besides clinical depression. And so it would check to see if you had narcissistic personality tendencies, if you had borderline personality, bipolar, like a bunch. They wanted to rule all of those out first, or narrow it down, so that they could build a treatment plan off of that, which was really cool. And I don't think I came back with anything other than clinical depression and general anxiety disorder. So if I remember right, because for a little while I thought that I was also a borderline personality, but that came back negative. And so anyway, then they base a plan. They tell you what they find, and they base a plan off of that. And in those sessions, you kind of work on, all right, here are your goals for therapy. These are the things that we're going to do to reach these goals. The eating disorder at the time. And so we did body scans. And so in her session, which were hour-long sessions, we would do an actual body scan meditation and then talk about it afterwards. And I remember having some very visceral experiences with that, where I would it would send me into a panic attack. So that was one of the biggest experiences. And then I also had to go home and do things like body scans and other different meditations that she actually recorded herself during our session. So that's what I remember most about CBT, but there's definitely some good information online as well if you're interested in learning more about it.